Okay, I'm tired of losing games. It's time to get serious about climbing. I'll look at some guides, I guess. It's not that this single mistake is what's holding back Jinx from having good farm in this game. What we mean by this is that you should be actively looking to rotate around the map to take CS in specific spots.
So if you don't miss a single CS by 10 minutes, you can have 114 CS like I have here.
Oh my god, why is every guide the same thing? I know I need to farm more minions. Screw this, I'll just buy some coaching.
Your CS average is really low in a lot of these games. And also just average overall is very, very low. You should definitely be higher, especially at like this MMR.
Okay, I'm desperate. Surely AI will tell me something different.
No, God! No, God, please, no!
Needless to say, improving at League can be quite frustrating, especially when the farming advice isn't even consistent. 10 CS per minute is by far the most common thing you'll hear, but not even Faker averages that amount in his own games. If the greatest player of all time isn't doing it, then why the hell is it being recommended to you? Not only that, but how is it the first thing that anyone talks about? Games are often decided by way more important things, like team fighting, objectives, vision, kills, etc. So why is your CS score one of, if not the first thing everyone talks about for improvement? For such a confusing topic, we're going to try and simplify things as much as possible for you in this video. We'll first break down why CSing is so important, as well as some hidden benefits that you get for improving your farming. Then we'll break down what actual CS goals you want to hit based on the specific champions that you're playing. This way you know exactly what you should be working towards for your champion pool with no more confusion. And then we'll wrap things up by talking about how to keep your CS numbers high, even in games where your team is losing horribly. Before we get into it though, if you want to improve fast and get the rank you've always wanted, then go to skillcap.com. Stop wasting your time grinding thousands of games only to see no progress. With premium courses for every role and skill taught by the best players, Skillcapped is the perfect platform to help take your game to the next level. Take our CSing course. While you wait for your next game to start, you can learn breakpoint patterns, last hitting under tower, optimal settings, the list goes on, all in just a few minutes to maximize your improvement rate. Or maybe you just like seeing your opponent's health go to zero. Then you'll love our trading course. We even have a skill test at the end so you can see how good you really are. Players just like you are leaving 5-star reviews and raving at how helpful they are. The best part? It's completely risk-free to try, as you're kept safe with our rank up insurance. If you don't significantly improve while actively using SkillCap, then you get your money back, no questions asked. So what are you waiting for? Get the rank you always wanted by clicking the link in the description below. Alright, now let's get into it. To talk about why CSing matters so much, let's put things into perspective. Let's imagine the difference between a Masters player and a Gold ELO student is around 40 CS at 25 minutes. The average value of each CS is about 20 gold, so 40 minions is a total of 800 gold. That obviously matters. That can often be the difference between having a completed item, a spare stopwatch, or maybe just an extra blasting wand. But there's no way that's more important to practice and learn over what is actually deciding your games. Having extra gold is nice, but every game is decided by teamfight posturing, vision control around objectives, the random inter on your team, etc. So shouldn't you be working on improving at that? And you'd be right. We won't actually argue against that. Extra gold each game is nice, but it's unlikely to be the reason you're losing games. That's actually not the entire problem. Bad CS scores are usually a big sign that a player doesn't actually understand what is important for climbing. It isn't just that you have less gold when you have mediocre CSing habits. You probably also have a ton of other issues that are making your games infinitely harder. For example, worrying too much about things going wrong. Almost every single time we bring up catching, side waves, or split pushing, a ton of people have the same concern. What if my team dies when I leave them alone? Being afraid of things going wrong not only leads to less farm, but it's a mindset that can lead to a whole set of other issues that prevent you from climbing. For example, not going for a decisive Baron call because you're afraid your jungler might mess up their smite. Low CS scores might also indicate lack of confidence in your own ability. Going into a side lane on your own, especially as a control mage or ADC, is pretty dangerous. You're very susceptible to bruisers and assassins just killing you. Once again, having bad farm can be a big sign that you're not confident in your ability to track assassins around the map, or even just outright duel them when they come and contest you. There's definitely a ton of scenarios where an ADC or mage could easily outplay an assassin with good mechanics. Having confidence in your ability is like 90% of what League of Legends is about. And players having low farm is often a result of being too grouped, which probably stems from not having any faith in themselves to outplay others. Which means that if you don't have the confidence to farm waves in a side lane on your own, then you're very likely playing laning phases too timidly. Or maybe you're not pushing the leads you build hard enough. So you see, it isn't that having lower CS averages is the end of the world. But the reason learning how to farm properly is so important is because fixing it will often resolve a ton of other problems that lower ELO players have when trying to improve. Finally, the biggest issue of all that low CS highlights is a lack of consistency. It's not hard to find players who have match histories filled with either pop-off games or complete duds, and that's because if you have low CS averages, your macro probably sucks. Proper mid and late game macro is all about pushing and pressuring with minion waves. This means that if you have low CS, you're not interacting with waves nearly as much as you should be. And if you're not interacting with waves constantly, you have bad macro. For example, let's imagine a dragon spawning soon. A good player would instinctively look to push out a wave before the fight. Not only does that help their CS average, but it gives them way more options during the actual fight. This makes the dragon fight way more consistent for that player to come out ahead. One, it may force someone on the enemy team to go defend the wave, which gives a momentary 5v4 advantage to take vision control. Or let's say no one cleared the wave before the dragon fight started. Having that wave near an enemy tower may give you or one of your teammates the chance of splitting off to go pressure the bot lane tower. That's just one example. The point is that pushing waves gives you both more farm and way more options to carry games. This is why everyone and their mother talks about farming all the time to improve fast. If you have bad farm, then you're obviously behind in gold every single game. But you probably also have a really poor macro, which is why all your games feel like coin flips. And players with low amounts of farm tend to have a lot of other game issues, which makes climbing harder as well. Hopefully it's clear why you need to fix your farming now. But what should actually be your goals to reach every single game? First, let's talk about where 10 CS per minute comes from and why it's not very realistic for most players in solo queue. So if you think about it, minion waves spawn every 30 seconds. Each wave has 6 minions, so there's 12 minions spawning every minute in all 3 lanes, plus extra cannon minions. So then if you account for recall timings, moving around the map, naturally missing some CS, then this means that if you catch most waves in a side lane, that you should begin to average out to about 10 CS per minute. If you watch competitive play, this is why all 6 laners generally have really high farm values, either close to 10 CS per minute or even more. That's because competitive play is all about efficiently farming every lane when objectives aren't up to contest. But obviously, that is not the case for any of you watching this. Solo queue is way more chaotic than competitive play. There's no voice comms or any synergy in general. And the assassin class is way more common, making it significantly more dangerous to be by yourself, and there's far less vision for you to work with than pros tend to get. On top of this, there's the big issue with solo queue that at some point everyone in the game gravitates towards mid to start the famous ARAM. If you want good CS, you can't just sit there sharing farm. This means that your ability to farm effectively depends on how effectively you're able to split off from your team and catch side waves every single game. And this is precisely why your ideal CS average will vary depending on the type of champion that you're playing. So to simplify things, we're going to break all champions up into 2 different categories. The first one is if you're playing natural side laning champions or efficient farmers. So for example, natural side laners would be champions like Riven, Fiora, Quinn, Echo, etc. These champions tend to get more CS on average since they usually sit alone in a side lane. Then examples of natural farmers would be characters like Ryze, Cassiopeia, Gangplank, basically every ADC in the game, etc. These are the type of champions that have very good tools to quickly clear and farm both minion waves and jungle camps. Even though champions here may not like being alone, their wave clear is so good that they can often sneak into a side lane and clear a wave so quickly that they can't really be punished for it. Not only that, but they also have the option of clearing leftover jungle camps in between waves to keep their CS levels higher. So if you play any of these types of champions, then here's the goals you want to reach. Immediately, you should strive for 7 CS per minute or more on average. If you have below that amount, you're definitely doing something wrong, and you should be way more critical of how you're moving around the map and catching waves. That's only your immediate goal though. Your long-term ambition should be to get your CS average to around 8 to 8.5 per minute on average on these champions as you get better and better at farming. Finally, there's a unique goal for those games where you're popping off. Let's say you're stomping a game as Tryndamere and you only got around 8 CS per minute. That is a very good sign that you're trolling your macro. When you're having a great game on side laners or champions with good wave clear like Victor, you should be averaging 9 to 10 CS per minute. If the enemy team can't contest you because you're too fed, you should be able to run around the map and take every CS and jungle camp you can get your hands on. This is where the 10 CS per minute dream goal comes from in a lot of cases. You're usually only able to achieve this level of farm when you're having a really good game. So now there's the opposite type of characters to talk about. For every champion that loves being in side lane, there's others that absolutely hate it. There's tanks like Ornn, Cho'Gath, Maokai, or immobile mages like Lux and Xerath. These characters all easily get outdueled in sides, so they almost always want to be either mid or grouping with their teams. And remember how we talked about champions who can farm everything in sight instantly? Well, there's a ton of champions that absolutely hate interacting with minion waves in jungle camps, like Akali, LeBlanc, Shen, Zoe, etc. It's not that they can't farm, but their kits are just generally slow at clearing minion waves in camps, meaning that it's way harder for them to keep their farm levels consistent. On these two types of champions, your immediate CS goals will be somewhere around 6 CS per minute. It's not that high, but it's definitely enough gold generation to be relevant in most games. That being said, your eventual goal is to work on getting way more consistent at last hitting waves and finding opportunities to push on these characters to slowly bring your average CS to around 7 per minute. And just like before, you do have a different goal when you're stomping games. It'll be way easier to pick up farm when you're winning the map, so you should strive for around 8 CS per minute when you're having a great game. Even if these champions aren't the best at clearing waves or being in the side lane, that won't matter if the enemy team can't stop you from farming. Great, now you should have a decent understanding of what your CS goals should be depending on the type of champion that you play. The final thing we have to talk about though is what happens when you and your team are the ones getting stomped. A big issue for lower ELO players is how quickly their farm falls apart when losing. Even when we look at a respectable rank like Platinum, players tend to fall terribly far behind in farm in lost games. However, if you look at great players like Nemesis or Reckless for example, they'll still have insane farm numbers even when they get stomped. How is that possible? The first thing to clarify is that people assume that farming is way harder when you're losing, when that actually isn't true. To keep things simple, your farm goals are almost exactly the same as when you're playing a standard game. Here's why. First, there's the obvious effect of what happens when you're losing. The enemy team can do whatever they want now, which means that they're very likely just pushing and farming a bunch of waves of their own. This means that minion waves are very likely to reach your towers where you can catch them. Secondly, there's the hidden minion formula that people often forget to consider. If you don't know how this works, it's pretty simple. If the enemy team has a higher average level than your own team, their minion waves begin to get stronger. Not only that, but the lanes in which you're at a tower deficit also buff enemy minions. If you're curious, try to be more aware of how minion waves are behaving when your team is losing. You'll often find that waves are constantly pushing towards your side of the map. This means that even when you're losing, that it's very rare to not have a minion wave to farm. The enemy team and hidden game mechanics are handing you a ton of minions naturally. So why do players fall behind on farm when losing then? To put it simply, if you have a hard time farming when you're behind, you're probably following your teammates around and getting baited into their silly desperation plays. Stop blindly listening to your team when you're behind and make decisions for yourself. You're not going to catch up by running around with your allies and just dying with them 24/7. A lot of what playing from behind is about is being patient and catching waves near your towers. You should also not be greedy and be taking the short path to rotate towards side lane waves. When you're behind, it's very easy to get caught out by lurking enemies in your own jungle. Make sure you take a safer path when rotating to side lane waves to make sure you're not dying and falling further behind. And that's honestly it. Being behind is not an excuse to have 4 or 5 CS per minute. You need to be way more consistent in your gold generation, even when things are going wrong. And remember, if you want to improve fast and get the rank you've always wanted, then go to skillcap.com. Our service is completely risk-free as you're kept safe with Rank Up Insurance. So what are you waiting for? Get the rank you've always wanted by clicking the link in the description below. Alright, that's a wrap on this one, guys. We here at SkillCap want to thank you for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.